So our third speaker in the session is Elliot Sefton-Nash from STEC at the European Space Agency. And Elliot will be talking about the ESA Prospect Payload for Luna 27, a development status.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kelsey. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, got you loud and clear.
Great. So good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone online. Thanks very much to the organizers of this meeting and the session chairs. Delighted to be here to give you an update on the Prospect development status. Prospect is a payload on Russia's Luna 27 lander to the South Polar region of the Moon. And I'm here representing a broad swathe of people, including the science team and the industrial consortium. So I don't think it's news to anyone here that LCROSS provided a very compelling result, that there is an abundance of near-surface volatiles in lunar regolith in polar regions. Of course, LCROSS impacted in Cabeus crater, which is in permanent shadow, but of course that doesn't mean there are not volatiles that could be cold-trapped in a kind of semi-permanent way in places that are not permanently shadowed. And these are the places that are of interest. And certainly for landers who rely on solar power, that's quite a compelling argument to target these places. The evidence that we have from remote sensing data sets and also from theoretical work shows that actually it's not a completely clear-cut picture about the distribution of water ice in particular at the lunar South Pole in this case. So we really need ground truthing, and that's really what Prospect is aiming to deliver on. And I'll just give an overview of the Lunar Program. So it's part of the Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency's lunar exploration program. Luna 25, or otherwise known as the Lunar Glob lander, is scheduled to launch with a contribution called Pilot D, which is a demonstrator precision landing package. 26 is an orbiter, and then 27, which is scheduled for launch in 2025, partially confusingly, will carry Prospect along with the full version of Pilot, which has a LiDAR and imaging navigation system for precision landing, as well as a communications package called Spectrum for UHF communication with the orbiter. Prospect Phase C, which is the detailed design phase, is well underway, and we're looking forward to delivery of the Prospect payload in 2023. Prospect has a large number of objectives. Please don't try to read these. I try to condense yet socially distance them into 4 key things that I think are important takeaways. The first is that we want to perform cryogenic extraction of regolith from down to about 1 meter. We want to characterize the polar surface and subsurface environment. And importantly, from a science perspective, we want to understand the abundance, the composition, both elemental and isotopic, of cold-trapped volatiles, both physisorbed and chemisorbed in lunar regolith. Crucially, from an exploration perspective, we'd like to also understand what the propensity is for extraction of oxygen, what the efficacy of oxygen extraction from lunar regolith is. And this is something that Prospect can do regardless of its landing site. So we're really trying to fly something which has science and exploration return in a kind of wherever it lands, which gives it some value for which other mission opportunities may come. So what is exactly Prospect? Well, it's really 2 main components. On the left in this rendering, you can see the lunar drill. It's called Proceed. I won't go through all the acronyms. Basically, it's a drill accompanied by an analytical suite, which also does some sample handling and distribution to the Russian instruments aboard the Luna 27 lander. The 2 elements have a number of features, which I'll just go through. So, of course, the drill can extract down to about 1 meter. As I'll talk about in a minute, this is important for sampling shallow zones of potential volatile stability in the long term. The sample size that's delivered to the Prospect instrument is about 100 milligrams, but there's a larger sample delivered to instruments on the Russian payloads. And so there are sample receiving mechanisms for both types of sample, and the drill is designed to do both. In the drill, there are a number of sensors, including torque and temperature and permittivity. These provide not only operations information, but science results. And there's an imager on the drill with 6 LED groups to characterize the local mineralogy. The PROSPER part of Prospect is the Analytical Lab and what we call the solids inlet system. So this is the kind of sample handling and processing part of the package. The PROSPER lab itself contains a number of quite compelling sensors. So it has an ion trap mass spectrometer as well as a magnetic sector, and an elaborate system to do gas processing with reactors. And it allows you to do evolved gas analysis by extracting volatiles from lunar regolith. It also has the capability to go up to about 1,000 degrees to do ISRU. And as part of the solids inlet system, as well as the carousel of ovens, there's an imaging system which allows you to constrain the sample volume, which you need for volatile abundance measurements. It's worth mentioning that part of Prospect was selected to fly on the Astrobotic Peregrine lander to Lacus Mortis next year. Exciting to say next year. So it's undergoing an aggressive schedule for development and qualification before delivery. And there's an abstract by Barbara Cohen, an LPSC abstract that was out this year. So it's worth saying Prospect is not necessarily just one payload. It's a family of payloads and derivatives that are suitable for many flight opportunities. We see Prospect as being one payload, but it has many investigations, and we've divided the science team accordingly. We focus on drilling, geotechnics, and sample handling. There is an imaging team dealing with image data coming from the two camera systems. For the sample analysis, we divided it into noble gases and then light elements and isotopes. And they're closely linked to the thermal environment of the landing site and the preservation of volatiles through the sample handling chain. We also have investigations about the precursor experiments, kind of a ground calibration for the ISRU demonstrator, and also for perhaps in kind of a new space mode, we have a prospecting investigation, which is really focused on trying to see how terrestrial mining practices and resource certification and uncertainty estimation can be applied to lunar resources. We also have a permittivity sensor on the drill, which characterizes the water content of the regolith as we drill down. Speaking of the drill, we had a successful test campaign in late last year, where we demonstrated the drill design is mature and capable with all the test scenarios that we could think were reasonable and a few extreme cases. We did tests at a range of simulant configurations with different size distributions, putting in large chunks of an orthosite to try and trick the drill, and at a range of different water ice contents. So we really tested it under a range of conditions that we might expect in lunar polar regolith. The images are really designed to, first and foremost, monitor and analyze the drill and the work area, observing the cuttings pile that gets produced as we drill downward. But also informs things about the landing site, the local area, local geology, constraining the local topography, the illumination conditions. It also monitors the transfer of the sample to the solids inlet system. So it's really a catch-all camera to monitor the activities in operations, but also get science data from. And the sample camera, as mentioned before, characterizes the volume of the sample inside the very small ovens before they are heated to evolve volatiles. The permittivity sensor in the drill, the design of that was tested, so you can see a prototype on the bottom right here. Basically, it determines the electrical permittivity of the materials that are in contact with the sensor. And as we drill down through the borehole, we'll kind of get a spiral-shaped profile of the permittivity as a function of location inside the borehole. So this will tell us something about water ice content, but maybe we can also tease out some other geologic properties depending on how the ground calibration goes. One key thing we're working on is understanding the volatile preservation. If we sample volatiles from depth, we need to know how they are preserved throughout that sampling chain, but before they are analyzed, in order that we can then back out the science information that we want. So for example, the original isotope ratios of D2H, we know their fractionation happens as a function of sublimation. So constraining that and knowing the thermal environment will really help us answer the science questions in a more constrained way. So we have a series of activities that are ongoing to try and really make sure that we have good bounds on these processes to allow us to meet the science objectives that we've set. So really this leaves us to a bunch of priority activities that the science team and the project team are doing during phases C and D. Volatile preservation is really a priority. We're characterizing the cameras, doing a lot of analysis of the engineering models, designing the calibration targets, thinking about how we should characterize the cameras using analog samples. We're trying to understand what the magnitude and the impact of potential contamination for the evolved gas analyses might be. So for example, thruster plume contaminants and things like that may exist. And we're also trying to figure out exactly, given the resources we may or may not have, not only on Luna 27, but on any other potential future mission, what are the science priorities, given a finite time, power, and other conditions that are limited, for example, data, then we need to understand what should we do first to get the maximum science with the minimum resources. So these are the main things that we're focusing on. And of course, there are ongoing discussions about landing site characterization. This is really a shout out to LRO, who have done a fantastic job, over many years, more than a decade, producing fantastic data and being able to characterize landing sites in such a precise way, such a holistic way. We now have, fantastic global coverage, but specifically over the South Polar region. We can really drill down and find the compelling landing sites that allow really good science results. The places with really the best combination of all the parameters that would allow us to meet our operations scenario, but also to maximize the chances that we can meet our science objectives.
And if we could wrap it up, that would be great.
Yeah, so we have ongoing work with that, with our Russian partners as well. And the main message there is that there are many exciting places, but we have to consider the time series of illumination conditions very carefully. And just to finish up with a list of great recent work done by members of the science team, and that I'll take any questions if there's time. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you so much. We have one very quick question and then we do have to move on. Jennifer Heldman asks, really interesting mission, and I'll echo that. That was really fascinating. Jennifer asks, given the complexity of this mission, especially regarding the sample handling process, are there plans for terrestrial analog testing of the hardware and operations?
Yeah, absolutely. The drill tests were not just of the drill, they also included the sample handling system. And to elaborate on those, we'll have qualification tests. In parallel, we also have the volatile preservation activities, which are a combination of lab tests and specific setups. And then we couple those to modeling in terms of diffusion rates, sublimation rates, thermal conduction. So there's a suite of things that will form an understanding of the sample chain.
Great, thank you so much. And then I'll turn it over to my co-chair to conduct the remainder of the session.